Thank you all very much for sharing your lunch with me, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. I want to tell you just right away that I am very, very excited to be here today. I'm excited to be at this conference that works to ensure inclusion of all our country's talent in the biomedical, behavioral sciences, including mathematics, as it says on the program. This is really important because I need to do a couple of things to get everything set up for my talk. First, I have to say that it is important to acknowledge that people in this country, all people in this country, have always made contributions to the sciences. They've made contributions despite what were seemingly insurmountable odds in a society that didn't appreciate their work, whether you talk about gender, whether you talk about ethnicity, whether you talk about race, whether you talk about socioeconomic class. People, all of our people, have contributed to science. So it's important to understand that before we get started. And also I want you to know that as I look around today and I see this group gathered here, I know that we've made tremendous strides in terms of the sciences and who participates. Because of the strength of your presentations at the conference, I know that we've made tremendous strides. But I also know that there's some more people who could have been here today, folks who could have participated. So what I want us to understand and to think about is how do we get everyone involved, and what are our responsibilities when we get there. Now, I want to tell you that the title for this program was Find Where the Wind Goes, Moments from My Life. And it came from a book that I wrote a number of years ago, and I really wrote it for teenagers. I wrote it because people were always saying things like, Dr. Jemison, tell me what to tell my son or daughter who wants to do X, Y, Z. Or either they would have me do things like, can you sign in your book to tell my kids to always do what my parents tell them to do? And I was trying to figure out who it was that they thought I was. And so I wanted to share some ideas about really moments from my life and how I ended up getting to where I am. And as I thought about it, I tried to come up with the title for the book, and the idea of finding where the wind goes, the idea of discovering the wind's destination as a choice, struck me, because the choice to try to find out what's going on with the wind is as material, it is a definitive, as an important choice, it's as open to interpretation as any other choice that we make in life. But yet it's something that we know will never have an end. I started the book by talking about being in kindergarten. You know how your kindergarten teacher always asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was in Chicago, south side of Chicago, in the 1960s. My kindergarten teacher asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was one of those little kids, raised my hand up, and she called around and she asked different people. They said firemen, policemen, different things. And finally she got to me and I said, I want to be a scientist. And she looked at me and she said, don't you mean a nurse? Well, but there's nothing wrong with that. She at that time was trying to help me, gear me toward a career that she thought was appropriate for a young black girl growing up in the 1960s in Chicago in the sciences. Well, being the kind of person I was, I put my hands on my hips and I said, no, I mean a scientist. And when I look back today at my life growing up and toward the future, I'm struck just how much the flow of life's events are like the wind. Events change us and redirect our lives, and they may begin very subtly, just like the wind begins with a very subtle change in temperature. And then there's this slight rustle of leaves, and if one observes the accompanying signs, you can start to predict tomorrow's weather. And a hint of the breeze may turn into a full-fledged hurricane. And the same way a hurricane can uproot old trees, that wind in your life, that change of events, can uproot old ideas. It can knock down blocks in your path. It can move you forward much more quickly and rapidly than you ever think. And it can hold you back. And so when I look back, I wonder what that little small stirring of the air was when I raised my hand and I waved it. What did that mean to my life? I don't know the answer to where the wind goes, but I always am trying to think about what are the trends, what's going on in life in the world, what do we need to think about, where will we be in a few short years, in 1,000 years. So what I want to do today is I want to share with you some of the thoughts that I've come across, maybe some of the experiences I've even had, and let you know that there's more out there, that there are a lot of things going on. And so, while I'm not going to tell you about space, particular, anything like that, I'm going to allow enough time for question and answer so we can find some of the areas you want to discuss. Now, I can know that throughout most of this conference, you probably considered the nuts and bolts of biomedical, behavioral, and mathematical research. But I want to look at it in the context of where your actions are going to take place. And I think we can best do this by using our time a little differently than, again, talking about space and things like that. Rather, I want to tell you about some of the things that I consider most important. Here are the three things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about time, possibilities, and responsibility. Time, possibilities, and responsibility. Each day, with any given second, we have a multitude of possibilities available to us. We have a multitude of possibilities available to us. And each second also carries with it the responsibility of what we decide to do, the actions that we choose. And we have to know that, time exists for us not to use just as individuals. I have time. But time also exists for us as members of families. Each community has time that it can use. Each nation has time that it can use. And the possibilities that come to us that we need to consider, they come to us as a single person or as a country, as a large or small community, as a society. They may be very big things or they may be tiny things that only affect one individual. And when we look at our responsibility, our responsibilities that we have are to ourselves as individuals, but believe it or not, they even accrue to the planet as a whole. So I want to think about those things. And just to be complete, I just want you to know that not only that, really confoundingly, our responsibilities stretch backward in time. Right? We have responsibilities backward in time. We have responsibilities that stretch forward in time. It's not just this exact, precise second we're at. We have responsibilities to the people, the generations before us. And we have to look toward those that are going to succeed us. I bring all of these things up because maybe folks haven't talked to you about that today yet. Maybe we haven't talked about that in this conference. So, a West African proverb says, if you wait for tomorrow, tomorrow comes. If you don't wait for tomorrow, tomorrow comes. Right? So, thinking about time, again, it's a finite resource with infinite possibilities. You all can multiply it out. I always talk about this. There are 86,400 seconds in each day. You can check my math. 86,400 seconds in each day. And each one of those seconds is precious because you can do with each one of them exactly as you please, but you can never get a single one of them back. And it's really interesting, again, because even though our time appears to go forward, we also have to consider the past and everything we do, what we dream about. Our past experiences inform how we observe the present. When you look around you, some of the things that you see really come from your past experiences. What it is that you even choose to observe comes from your past experiences. We want to know about and understand the past, even if it wasn't a part of our lifetime, right? We spend time right now thinking about our parents' lifetime, even going back before our species was even evolved. Those are things we have to think about. So I want to just say, time is there. It's always part of the equation. And I always want you to think of it as a resource you have available. So the second one is possibilities. Possibilities exist not just as some random event, right, that the universe threw in front of you. Possibilities are created. Many times possibilities are created. We create them and we have to recognize them. And I want you to know that science has a role in that as well. I want to do this by telling you that I grew up in the 60s. At least a good part of my childhood spanned the 60s. I was always a wannabe hippie. I was always mad that I wasn't quite old enough to be one yet. But so when I look back at the 60s, what strikes me about it, that it was a difficult time, was not the anarchy that you always hear people talk about, right? When folks talk about the 60s these days, they always talk about it was anarchy. But to me, that's not what the 60s were about. The 60s were about the belief that everyone could participate. There was a willingness to try to discover things. Everyone in this world wanted to change things. We saw decolonialization of countries happening. We saw people